All hail the new King of England, King Charlie Appleby the First. Salutations and welcome, friends, to another episode of Countdown to Keeneland. I am your host, Matthew DeSantis. You can find me on Twitter at the handle Failed to Menace. And as I alluded to in the cold open, Charlie Appleby had himself quite a weekend last weekend at Woodbine, and we're going to talk more about that on this show. But just to let you folks know what this show is all about, we're every single week counting down the days, the weeks, the races until Keeneland, until we get to that Breeders' Cup and all of those great races on the Friday and Saturday. And we're starting to get into some really great races for the 2-year-old prep races and covering the win and you're in races and letting you know where the fields stand as of now for all of these different prep races. So a lot that we're going to cover. We're going to recap what happened the last week. We're going to preview what's happening this coming week, and then we're going to cover some news and notes as it relates to the Breeders' Cup at the end. Well, as I said, my name is Matthew DeSantis. You can find me on Twitter at the handle at Failed to Menace, and make sure to press that like button. Make sure to subscribe to Trust the Profits. We have so much coverage this week on the Pennsylvania Derby. I actually just got done recording something with Sarah Al-Badwi of Horse Racing Nation, where we went through the entire 13 race card at Parks for Pennsylvania Derby Day. So if you want to check that out, please do. We did it in less than an hour as well, which is amazing to get through 13 races in that time, with both of us sharing opinions on long shots. So a lot of stuff there. Colin, Vinny, they were joined by Andrew. You might know him as at Philly Boy on Twitter. That was a great doubling down episode as well, focused on the Pennsylvania Derby. All sorts of previews this week for those big races at Parks on Saturday. And listen, if you're walking around Parks on Saturday and you see a guy kind of dressed like this, come up and say hi. I will be there on Saturday at Parks. Love to see all of you and buy you a drink, have a good laugh, and maybe give out some picks and plays. So, but like I said, make sure to subscribe to Trust the Profits for all of our great content, whether it's about the Breeders' Cup, whether it's about the Pennsylvania Derby, whether it's about, pick 4, pick 5 sequences in future weeks, whether it's about previewing particular Breeders' Cup races, top 5s, top 10s. We do all sorts of different content from the guys across the network. All right, well, let's dive into this really exciting episode where we previewing some great races that took place at Woodbine this past week, and then previewing some of the races that are taking place at Newmarket. So this is, even though we have the big races at Parks for Saturday, the Pennsylvania Derby, the Cotillion, those are not Breeders' Cup Challenge races. Breeders' Cup Challenge races last week took place in Canada. This week, they're taking place over in England. So we're international in this show, not just focused here on North America, but let's dive in to take a look at where we stood after last week's races. And we'll start with what took place at the Woodbine Mile. And that was, as Pete Aiello would say, the racetrack announcer down at Gulfstream Park, easy money. Let me tell you something. That was easy money for Charlie Appleby and Modern Games as they won the Woodbine Mile and qualified for the FanDuel Mile in the Breeders' Cup Win In You're In Challenge. And Modern's Games just looked so much the best in that particular race. So incredibly impressive. Great inside run. William Buick, the jockey, just did an outstanding job angling that horse out, coming out of the turn, just pulled away by about 6 lengths. It was really no contest once he was able to angle out and get out of traffic from the inside. Just so impressive from Modern Games. One of the things I love about this is Modern Games, of course, very infamously wins that Juvenile Turf last year, running for purse money only. The accidental scratch, people's tickets not being able to get cashed. It was just an absolute disaster, a PR nightmare, just a really bad look for horse racing and Del Mar and the Breeders' Cup that particular day. But what I love about Modern Games is, unlike what we've seen from the Juvenile Stakes at the Breeders' Cup last year, which has come back very weak in terms of Corniche now already being retired, horses like Command Performance taking forever to break their maiden, horses like that Juvenile just has not come back particularly strong. The Juvenile Turf actually has come back pretty strong. A lot of the horses running in that Juvenile Turf have gone on to really great 3-year-old campaigns, and it's great to see Modern Games as a successful now older horse, as a more established 3-year-old, but just showed so much class in winning that Woodbine Mile over Ivar, who came in second. Ivar certainly looked good. It was a game second. Relative rustiness in that this was really his only second start of the year. So, getting still back into form, but was a clear couple of Modern Games. But Charlie Appleby, William Buick, I told you last week, when you see Charlie Appleby bringing William Buick over, that's follow the money. That's where you want to go. Even if you're not getting great odds, that's where you want to go. That's where you want to use those horses in pick 4, pick 5 sequences, because that's about a sure bet as there is right now in North America when Appleby brings over Buick to ride his top horses. So that was, this is a category in a division in the FanDuel Mile that is getting pretty filled up, but you see a fair amount of scratches. You see Baid being scratched out. Baid, of course, will be running his final race at Ascot in a couple of weeks. That's also a win and you're in race, but it's already been announced that he will be retiring after that race. There's another horse that's scratched out. We're going to get to that one at the end, but this is a field that, even though we have a lot of qualifiers, it's still a field that feels a little uncertain at this point, because there are so many horses that are both international horses that are, scratched out. And so it'll be interesting to see who ends up in this FanDuel Mile. But certainly Modern Games, Inspiral, Casa Creed, Songline, Jet Dark, a lot of, Viejos Tiempos, a lot of really, really good and exciting horses in this field. So looking forward to those 2 more prep races that they have, the Coolmore Turf Mile and the Queen Elizabeth II Stakes at Ascot. But I mentioned last week that we were starting to move into juvenile season in terms of the win and you're in races. And indeed, let's start with the Pattison Summer Stakes that took place at Woodbine last week. And that was won again by Charlie Appleby and William Buick. And again, it made it look easy with Mysterious Night. So impressive. The horse broke a little slow. Mysterious Night broke a little slow coming out of the gate, but moved up on the inside very quickly, moved to the lead without even being asked. That was the most amazing part, was move to the lead without being asked around the 3rd and 4th turn into the home stretch. Buick still was not asking this horse for anything. The horse naturally went to the lead with no prompting. And then when he shook the reins and pushed down on the neck and went to the crop, the horse just opened up with ease, ended up winning by 6 lengths. Obviously, this is still a very open division. You see there's still several more when you're in races. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more than just these horses in the field. We've talked about this before. These are just the when and you're in races. Horses can also qualify through points that they accumulate in stakes races. And so these are going to be much larger fields than just these when and you're in winners. But these are the ones guaranteed a spot. But we saw Auguste Rodin last week over in the KPMG Champion Juvenile Stakes look incredibly impressive with Aidan O'Brien. Probably not surprising that you see the 2 best trainers over, 2 of the best, I shouldn't say the 2 best, 2 of the best trainers over in the United Kingdom, both with horses qualified for the Juvenile Turf with Augusta Rodin and Mysterious Night. But Mysterious Night looked quite the part in that race and was just so incredibly impressive. So those first 2 races were pretty chalky. But let's go to this last one, the Juvenile Fillies Turf. This was one that was the big long shot of the weekend. And this was in the Natalma Stakes. And this was won by Last Call, which went off at 28-1. This was the biggest upset on the board, actually the biggest price on the board, the biggest upset of the 3 when you're in races. This horse had not yet even broke its maiden. This was breaking this horse's maiden. So Last Call, who had finished second to Cairo Concert, in its debut effort, finished 4th in a maiden race last time out, now comes back and wins the Grade 1 Natalma Stakes. A really great ride. This horse that was sitting kind of mid-pack and then went wide and made a move. It was really the first horse to make a move and maybe caught everybody a little off guard. People were maybe biding their time a little bit more, but you saw Last Call make a move around that third, fourth turn to get up there with the leaders and then got to home, kick for home, and really like to stretch out. So very, very impressive effort from Last Call, but obviously a big upset there. But we should point out that Tahira winning the week before in the Moyglare Stud Stakes was also an upset. Maybe not quite as big of an upset. Tahira was a very, very good filly as well, but beat Meditate, who was the overwhelming favorite in that race. So we've had two upsets so far in the win and you're in races in this particular division. We'll see if that continues as we have four more races here in the Win You're In Breeders' Cup Challenge for the Juvenile Fillies Turf. But a lot of excitement here in this particular race. I really liked a horse, G. Laurie, in that particular race in the Natalma. I mentioned that horse, a Grand Motion horse that had broke its maiden at Colonial Downs and then was going up directly to Woodbine for this race, second career race. Ran third. I thought ran really well underneath. This was a horse that just didn't have the best trip. Once it finally got out in the open, it was just bottled up inside, was just really congested in a large field. I don't want to put anything on the jockey necessarily. It was just a tough spot. But once this horse got open, it was able to start to give a little bit of a run. You could see the horse has some talent and ability. So G. Laurie is a horse that, even though it didn't win, still going to be keeping an eye on this horse as we approach that Juvenile Breeders' Cup turf for the 2-year-olds. So a lot of excitement there at Woodbine, and that's where all three of last week's Win and You're In races were. And this week, the two Win and You're In races that we have for the Breeders' Cup Challenge are over in England, and they're both at Newmarket. And so let's dive in to these fields. And let me tell you something. We got to start with this kind of split screen, if you will, or split graphic, because there are 14 horses currently in the Dubai Rockfel Stakes, which is 7 furlongs on the turf. And this is one that qualifies for the Juvenile Fillies Turf. And this is a loaded field. Like I said, 14 horses for the Fillies. And it's a field that has, I think, a lot of potential and a lot of interesting horses. I want to identify a few of them for you in case you're not familiar. So the favorite right now in the betting and some of the sports books overseas is Commissioning. You'll see there that is the John and Thaddy Gosden trained horse. John Gosden, one of the great trainers. John and Thaddy Gosden, one of the great teams, but John Gosden, one of the great trainers in the United Kingdom as well. And one of my personal favorites actually trains in Spiral, who I really like a lot. And so great trainer. And this is a horse that has won its only start. So Commissioning is a horse that's only making its second career effort, but was so impressive in that first effort and is currently actually close to an even money favorite in this race, which is pretty stunning in a 14 horse field. I think currently in the British sports books, it's 6-4. So very close to being even money in this particular race. Olivia Maralda, this is another horse I'd encourage you to keep an eye on, trained by O'Callaghan. This is the most experienced horse in the race, actually. 5 career starts, 1 win, 3 seconds. Interestingly enough, this horse finished second to Meditate, who we just got done talking about, who was upset by Tahira last week, or I guess 10 days ago or so, was upset by Tahira. But Meditate was this monster filly that everybody was kind of thinking was going to be this heir apparent to the next great filly and mare turf runner over there. And so, finishing second to Meditate, no, that's no disrespect to Olivia Maraldo. So that's, like I said, a really good effort there. She's currently the second favorite on the morning line. Also, this is a horse finished behind Dramatized. That's another horse that's likely headed to the Breeders' Cup. So Olivia Maralda has a few second places, but has always been running against monster competition. So I do like the fact that she's got a little bit more experience, Commissioning, a little green, all the talent in the world. But Olivia Maralda, I do like having that experience there. I think that's a interesting horse to look at. Another one that's interesting to look at is Rage of Bombay. This is a horse that's 8-1 right now in the sports books, trained by Eve Houghton. I think a good choice, 2 for 2 in the career, 2 wins in both career starts. Both were at 7 furlongs, so we're staying at a distance which she's comfortable at. Like that a lot. Certainly, this is a horse I think is useful underneath, if nothing else. You're getting 8-1 there. And then Dance in the Grass. This is a horse that you're getting a little bit more odds on, but I really like. And this is a horse that didn't run great last time out, admittedly, but has a stakes win, is 2 for 3 winning, and is cutting back to 7 furlongs. So that last time out that wasn't that great was at a mile. Now cutting back to 7 furlongs where the previous 2 wins were. And like I said, already has a stakes win to her name. So 14 horse field could go in a lot of different directions. I know Sydney Arms Chelsea's another one that's pretty interesting. Rich is actually attracting a fair amount of money overseas as well. So there's a lot of ways to go here. But those 4 that I mentioned, Commissioning, Olivia Meralda, Rage of Bombay, Dance in the Grass, that's kind of where I'm looking in terms of where I think the winner is going to come out of. Well, let's transition from the Dubai Rockfel Stakes to the Juddmonte Royal Lodge Stakes. And this is also at Newmarket on Saturday. So it should be pointed out that the previous race is on Friday, the Rockfel Stakes. So that was on Friday. So Juvenile Royal Lodge Stakes is on Saturday. This is for the boys. This is also a Breeders' Cup for the Juvenile Turf. And this is another loaded field going a mile on the turf. The favorite is Charlie Appleby's Flying Honors. That is the horse that is kind of attracting a lot of the attention right now in the sports book. 2 for 3 winning, including a stakes win. The last 2 wins. So this horse lost in its debut effort, won the next 2 times out. The last 2 wins have come by a combined 15 lengths, including a stakes win, as I mentioned. So Flying Honors looking to add to that resume. Another very impressive horse in the stable of Charlie Appleby. And notable that keeping this one over there to run at Newmarket as opposed to bringing Mysterious Night over to Woodbine to qualify this way. So making sure that his best of the best are not running against each other. Another horse that's attracting some attention is Aidan O'Brien's Greenland. This is a horse that I can't help but make a joke about because, of course, we saw Luxembourg win about 10 days ago a Breeders' Cup Challenge race. Now we have Greenland. I don't know how many other European country named horses we're going to get here, but it was very cute to see Greenland there. The line is pretty high, just broke the maiden last time out on Greenland. So not as good as fellow European country named Luxembourg, but certainly a horse to keep an eye on. An Aidan O'Brien horse, always a serious contender. Another horse you see here in the probables list is Augusta Rodin, who we talked about. This is a horse that already won a winning year in race just 10 days ago and is potentially going to get wheeled right back here in the Royal Lodge Stakes. And it's important to point out, this is not uncommon overseas. Augusta Rodin had a 70-day break, ran at the KPMG Stakes, and is now coming back in the Juddmonte Royal Lodge Stakes, wheeling a horse back on 2 weeks rest, particularly at 7 furlongs or a mile, is not super uncommon over in the United Kingdom. And that's something you just see a little bit more regularly over there, as opposed to here in the United States, where horses generally are spaced out about a month, 4 to 5 week sequences and cycles. It's just not as common overseas. They run them more often. Quite frankly, I think that's better for the horse to get them more foundation, more seasoning. But Augusta Rodin, obviously already qualifying for the Breeders' Cup, so could really add to that resume quite a bit if it's able to collect the second Breeders' Cup Challenge win in just 2 weeks. And the final horse I'll mention in this particular field that I really like is Holloway Boy. And this is a horse that shocked at Ascot, making its debut as a first-time runner at Ascot, won at a really big price. I want to say 56-1, won at a huge price at a stakes rate at Ascot, at Royal Ascot, I should say. And so that's a horse that really, I think, took a lot of notice, backed it up with a really close second last time out. This is a good horse, and you're still getting a pretty decent price on him. I think the overseas odds were somewhere in the 6 to 10-1 range. So you're still getting a pretty decent odds on Holloway Boy, stretching out to a mile for the first time. But I think this horse should like the distance. That's a horse that has a little bit of a value that maybe is interesting for you to take a look at. So we only have 2. We have a bunch of Breeders' Cup winning races in 2 weeks' time that we'll be previewing next week. But for this week, we just have those 2 races at Newmarket that we're previewing for the Breeders' Cup Challenge. But that certainly does not mean that we're done with Breeders' Cup news. Nay. We still have plenty of Breeders' Cup news. So We'll start by one of the horses that I had shown was scratched out, and that is Count Again. The Phil D'Amato trained horse is officially out for the rest of the year. This is a horse that won the Shoemaker Mile and qualified the for the turf, or I'm sorry, for the FanDuel Mile, but will not be headed to the Breeders' Cup. D'Amato did not say that there was any particular injury this horse had, but rather the horse just simply had a series of minor issues that just kind of didn't sit right with D'Amato. Count Again is 70 years old already, so wanted to give this horse a break. He did say Count Again will return as an 8-year-old. It feels like they're really trying to point this horse towards the 2023 Breeders' Cup Classic at Santa Anita, kind of close things out for this horse on the West Coast, on its home turf, so to speak. And so, because D'Amato even kind of said this horse might get a late start to his 2023 campaign, just gearing up to that Breeders' Cup Classic and really taking into consideration the load that Count Again already has logged after those 7 years of racing. So news there, obviously, in terms of Count Again being out of the Breeders' Cup and the FanDuel Mile. Now, as it relates to the Breeders' Cup Distaff, a couple of other pieces of information that I think are interesting. One is Pauline's Pearl, according to Steve Asmussen, is being given a break. Pauline's Pearl probably was not going to qualify for the Breeders' Cup Distaff, but might have. Did accumulate a fair amount of points, winning graded stakes races. Could have very well been nominated, but hadn't turned in the best efforts the last 2 times out, and is now officially out and is being given a break probably through the remainder of 2022. So next time we see Pauline's Pearl is going to likely be 2023. However, while Pauline's Pearl is going to the bench, it looks like Echo Zulu, the other one of Asmussen's horses, of course, last year's Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies winner, is going to be returning to the track shortly. It looks like either the grade 3 Dogwood at Churchill or the Ravens Run Stakes. That's kind of where we're looking, or looks like that's where they're going to be going. I think Wicked Halo is potentially going to go to one of those. Echo Zulu maybe going to the other. Asmussen doesn't seem like he wants to run the two against each other, so spacing that out. But Echo Zulu, who was, of course, if you remember, a late scratch actually at Belmont for lameness, has been kind of training in the background this whole time, and now, like I said, looks like we'll be close to returning. Will this horse have, be pointed towards the Breeders' Cup Distaff? That seems unlikely, but still, news in that Distaff division, always interesting. And then finally, we'll close out the news in the Breeders' Cup Classic division, which is that Epicenter is shipped down to Keeneland. And it looks like Epicenter and Flightline, we already knew Flightline was not going to run again until the Breeders' Cup Classic. And it looks like that's also true for Epicenter, who, of course, last ran in the Travers. Does not look like Epicenter is going to run again until the Breeders' Cup Classic. So the two kind of best horses in the Classic, I mean, I think it's Flightline and then a big gap before we get to anybody else. But Flightline and Epicenter both kind of on the bench. Some of these other horses are still jockeying for position for top 3-year-old, etc. We're going to see obviously a lot of those this weekend at the Pennsylvania Derby with Cyberknife, with Taba, with Rich Strike, with one of my favorite horses, Simplification, who's a little bit of a long shot, Skippy Longstocking, Zandon. So you got a lot of horses there. But Rich Strike, of course, the winner of the Kentucky Derby, is going to be pointed towards the Lucas Stakes. Then after the Lucas Stakes, connections have said they'll make a decision about whether or not the horse will go to the Classic. It feels like that's the direction the horse is going to go in. It feels like they're going to definitely want to run this horse in the Classic. We'll see. I mean, the horse ran a perfectly acceptable 4th place in the Travers, ran a good number, certainly. Was very close with Cyberknife, Zandon, and Rich Strike right there, kind of 2, 3, 4, well behind Epicenter. But certainly outpaced several other really good horses in that race. So, maybe is getting back into form. We'll see what the Lucas Stakes holds. Does look like Hot Rod Charlie is also going to be pointed towards those Lucas Stakes. So not going to be a walk in the park necessarily, going up against potentially an older horse in that race. So we'll see how that turns out for Rich Strike. But we're getting into those final preps for the Classic, for all of these particular races, for the older division in particular. Like I said, we're getting into the qualifying races for those juveniles, but we'll see. Like I said, we'll keep you updated with the Epicenter Flightline news. And then, of course, remember, Life is Good headed to the Woodward. That is where he'll be running his final prep race before making a decision about whether or not to run in the Classic or the Dirt Mile. All right. Well, that is it for this episode of Countdown to Keeneland. Make sure to press that like button, subscribe to Trust the Profits, and make sure to follow me on Twitter at the handle at Fail to Menace. Until next time, friends, my name is Matthew DeSantis, and remember that it's now post time.